Welcome back to a continuation of the series on clutch. And the previous video I mentioned that this clutch is burnt because it's smooth and looks like marble or granite. However, even though the surface is smooth, the force of the springs on the pressure plate should compensate for that. So this should still be good, which leads me to believe that either the pressure plate has been tampered with, which is in my case very likely because I had all sorts of weird stuff done to the car, or they're just weak, right? The springs, the more you compress them, over time you compress them millions of times. They're after 50 years or so of using the clutch, they become weak, and that's probably true as well. So it's probably a combination of both problems. So I was reading the manual and seeing what the manual says, that these levers here, they're adjustable. As you can see, there's nuts here, and I noticed that two of them were pushed far in, this one and this one, and then this one here is sticking out. And sure enough, just by looking at the clutch pressure plate, I can see that this side, for example, it's sticking way below the face here. So if I were to put this on the car, it wouldn't even be touching the clutch disc. And this side, it's actually sticking out past it. Sorry, that side there. So it's definitely somebody definitely tampered with this. I doubt that it would have come from a factory like this. So definitely somebody messed this around. So what's happening is the clutch pressure plate is actually only engaging one side of the clutch. However, that was only one of our problems because from all I heard, the whole pressure plate and clutch disc were the wrong size. However, turns out that they're probably the correct ones. So on the manual, there are two sections for the clutch. One is, it just says clutch, and then the other section says clutch and E-shifting. So it's a slightly different setup for that transmission. It's a rare car, the Rambler American with the E-shift. From what I understand, it's just a mechanism that uses engine oil, pressurized engine oil, to engage the clutch automatically. So it becomes an automatic transmission, automatic shifting transmission, if I understood correct. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I haven't had the chance to look at it. But the first section, which is the normal clutch, at the end it says there's a small section with clutch specifications. And it says here that for the OHV, which is the overhead valve engine, there should be 6 springs when they are compressed to 1.5 inches, there should be 230 pounds of pressure per spring. So 6 springs, that will give us a total of about 1,300 pounds of pressure around there. So it is quite a bit of pressure. That's in kilos, that's about 500 kilos. That's about half a ton of pressure. So they should be very, very stiff. But once again, this is at 1.5 inches. So the full length of the springs is, I just checked, it's over 2 inches. We'll get to that in a second. And apparently they used to be color coded. So the black one, black springs, came on the overhead valve clutch, which had 6 springs. And then for the flathead, it gives two options of 2 springs at 195 pounds, and there's no color, or 4 springs at 230, and they're also black. So basically, from what I understand, my interpretation is that black springs are 230 pounds, and the springs without any color, without any paint, is 195. Now, it does not make sense to me that a clutch pressure plate would have only 2 springs, because if you were to engage that, half of it would engage and the other half of the clutch would just move. So there should be at least 3 springs. So what I'm thinking is, it doesn't really make sense, this information. And then it says adjacent. On one set of clutches it's adjacent, and the other one it's diametrically opposite. I've got no fucking clue what that is. It also doesn't make sense to have 4 springs. So I'm not exactly sure what this means, but at 230 pounds, in my case, in the clutch that I have here, the pressure plate, there are 6 springs in total, and 2 of them on each side. So there's 3 sides, 3 levers, basically. So basically 2 springs for each lever. So for each lever, at 1.5 inches of compressed length of the spring, I should have 460 pounds, which is a very considerable amount of force I'd have to be exerting on them. But basically, the stiffer they are, the better. I honestly don't care if the clutch is very stiff, if the pedal is very stiff. I'm obsessed with reliability. So one idea that I had was to put some more springs on the clutch. It does have room. I think I mentioned this on the previous video. It does have room for another 3 springs. So maybe I could get springs from the other clutch that I have and put it on this one. And then finally at the very end it says that a clutch disc diameter of 8.5 inches is used for the overhead valve and the flathead, or the L head, which is called the same thing in line 6, flathead or L head. So the diameters are correct for at least one of them. The manual does not mention any 8-inch clutch disc, so that one is definitely wrong. Somebody probably got it from some other car. According to my research, it was the same clutch spline count and diameter was used on a Volvo, 2000 and something Volvo, and 1961 to 1963 Studebaker, a few other Dodges, so it was probably taken from some other very small car. Now, the bigger the car, the bigger the engine, the bigger the clutch. That's why trucks had very big clutch discs, maybe 11-inch diameter or 12-inch diameter, and very, very wide. So an outer diameter, very small inner diameter, giving it a very large surface area. So based on that information, for a Volvo, which was a 2-liter, it's a 2-liter engine. It fits on the 2-liter Volvo engine. That's only a 2-liter car, and it's using an 8-inch clutch plate. So the Rambler is a 3.2 liter. So I would expect a bigger, a larger clutch disc, or at least to compensate for a smaller clutch disc, you need stronger springs. So basically, the bigger the surface area, the less force you need to apply on it. It's kind of laws of physics. It's not very hard to understand. Imagine a lady steps on your foot. She's wearing high heels. All her weight is concentrated on one point on the high heels. So it would hurt. If she were to just step on you with bare feet, it wouldn't hurt at all. Her weight hasn't changed. What has changed is the concentration of force. all the force is connected to one single point instead of being spread out. So the more so basically the more concentrated force you have in one point, the more force you have for the same amount of pressure or weight. You have more force concentrated in one point. The more spread out it is, the less force you have. So for conversely, for larger clutch diameter, you have more surface area. It's sticking to the flywheel better, so you don't need as much spring force. Or conversely, if you want to put a very thin clutch disc on a big horsepower engine, you need to have very, very stiff springs to compensate for that. So that's that. I'm not going to go into explaining that too much. And then finally, on the section on E-stick shifting, or clutch and E-stick shifting, it says you can see the picture there. That's a good thing. They have pictures, and the clutch plate is very different, very much different than the ones I showed you in the previous video. I'll show you again. But it says it's supposed to be a 9 1/8 clutch disc. So that's probably where the confusion is coming from. But right now I do have the overhead valve engine, so going back to the springs, I should have at least 6 springs. So see, the thing is, the total force, what I can interpret from the information is that total force is different. It's much different. So that might be one of the reasons why my clutch was slipping. So it could be, see, there could be various combination of various things going on here. So we're supposed to have 6 springs. Each spring is 230. That gives us that value that I said, about 130 pounds. For the flathead, you only have 4 springs of 230. So that's not even 1,000 pounds. That's 800 and 920 pounds of pressure. So that is a significant difference, especially if they're worn. So remember, this clutch has probably been in use for 50 years or so. Nobody knows how long. So the other one should be new, but I've had problems with it too. I'll just get to that in a second. So, okay, so I guess we're done with that. One of the first things that I noticed when I got the car is that the adjustment linkage, there's a long nut, or threaded rod basically, and it was too small. It actually fell off once. I pressed the clutch and it fell off. It just the whole linkage just removed, fell off from the arm that moves the clutch. So I thought that was odd, and even if I put the that threaded rod the longest I could, that was barely holding on, maybe just 3 threads, it still wouldn't be sufficient. So it was strange that was happening. So I ended up not worrying about it. I just made another shift linkage. I just made a longer threaded rod, and that solved the problem until now, I guess. However, now with the new clutch disc and pressure plate, the 8-inch one that I was showing you guys, the linkage is not engaging the clutch at all. So it's still the same problem. The throwout bearing moves maybe that much before it actually touches the levers on the pressure plate. So now we have the opposite problem. The clutch is not disengaging. It's staying engaged. So there's obviously something wrong. I'll show you guys what I mean now. So there you can see the lever that I made. So I made that lever there. That threaded rod there. As you can see, it goes into that arm, which moves the clutch. However, it's not going to be easy to show it to you guys here. As you can see, just now it's starting to engage. However, this is already at the end of its travel. It should actually start engaging way before that. It's actually to the maximum right now, because it's the lever is actually touching the back. You won't be able to see it here, but it's touching the back of the bell housing already. So it's not supposed to be there. I'll try to remove the lever here so that you guys, so it's gonna be hard to do with one hand. So the clutch is not disengaging fully. I could possibly drive it like this, but I don't want to. And how do I know it's not disengaging? Because I had an assistant press on the clutch pedal, and then if the transmission is in gear, with the clutch pedal depressed, I should be able to move the output shaft. And I was not able to do it. Don't confuse yourself. This has the overdrive. So in whatever gear, I should be able to move it the opposite way of the rotation of the car, because it's got a freewheeling mechanism. But you see, it doesn't move the other way, and it wasn't moving the other way even while the clutch was pressed. So basically, in other words, if while the clutch is pressed, the whole transmission should be the same as neutral. It's not doing anything. You should be able to move it even though it's in gear, because it's disconnected from the engine. I don't have enough force to move the transmission in gear and move the engine. I don't have sufficient force to do that. So that's our problem here. So either I have to make adapt or change that throwout bearing so that it's longer and it's touching the I'm gonna have to remove this so that you guys can see what's happening. Basically, I've got too much free play on the throwout bearing, which means that either it's the wrong throwout bearing, or this clutch pressure plate is just simply too small, too narrow, or the throwout levers are too far away. So as you can hopefully see, just look at how much I can move that. That's without any force. So it actually just touches the back of the bell housing before it's able to actually push the levers on the pressure plate. So that's my problem. It wasn't that bad with the other pressure plate. However, it was already wrong as well, because I had to change the that adjusting linkage there. So I decided that the first thing to do is I want to test this clutch pressure plate here, and I want to play around with the adjustment levers here, or at least see what happens when I loosen them. So the way this mechanism works is, on this side, these levers, they're able to move up and down into the actual pressure plate here, to this disc here. So basically they're not threaded onto here. The top of them is threaded though. So if I loosen, in this case, if I loosen these nuts, it allows the lever to move up more, which basically disengages, moves the pressure plate farther away, actually closer. Sorry, it moves the pressure plate closer to the face here, so it sticks out more. If I tighten the nuts, then it allows the lever to move up more, and since the clutch disc pressure plate face here is connected to the levers, it just moves in more. It moves towards the inside more. So if this was in the car, tightening the nuts would cause the flywheel to move. It would cause the pressure plate to move away, farther away from the disc and therefore from the flywheel, thereby increasing the distance and reducing the spring capacity. If it were to go conversely, if I loosen them, the pressure plate goes closer to the flywheel, closer to the disc, so it's able to compress the disc more. However, the longer the spring is, the less compressed length it has, the less force it is exerting. So although the pressure plate would be closer to the flywheel, it would be closer to the flywheel at a lesser force, with a lesser force. Unless I changed the springs or had longer springs with force. So basically what happens is, right now, the springs, they're almost 2 inches. So remember how the manual said 1.5 inch we're supposed to have force? At 2 inches, I have pretty much no force at all. So on the lever here, that's the lever here, that's the lowest. I can actually move the lever up and down fairly easily, using only 2 of my thumbs. So that is a bad sign, and I can move the springs past 1.5 inches. This is supposed to have, remember, 2 springs are supposed to have about 500 pounds. So I'm a strong guy, but probably not that strong. So these springs are worn out. They're weak. Just going to loosen the other one here so it's the same. Basically, in this video, I'm also showing you guys how to adjust or disassemble a pressure plate the primitive way. Now, in a perfect world, let me just check the time. In a perfect world, it wouldn't really matter. You wouldn't really need very high precision on these adjustment nuts, because the pressure plate should have more than enough force to hold the disc to the flywheel. So if you tighten one a little bit more than the other, it shouldn't matter, because they're all going to still be tight. If it's way off, then yeah, it's going to interfere, but if it's just a little bit off, it wouldn't matter. So right now, in this case, however, one of them is sticking too low, much too low. not good. So I need to compress a little more than 1.5. I'm going to try to compress all three of them at once. There's no way I could be exerting 1,000 pounds of pressure like that, so I'm going to go ahead and say that these springs are completely weak and worn out and need to be replaced. Or I can just get the whole pressure plate, which is proving difficult. So my plan is to get another pressure plate because I don't think they sell the springs by themselves. Maybe I can get the springs alone, but and like I said, and I can show you the here again, there is room for another 3 springs. So in each of these holes there's a, why is it so dark? Let me try to fix this here. I don't know why it's so dark. Anyways, there we go. It's 3 holes. However, only 2 of the holes. The middle hole has no springs. However, there is room and there is another ridge, so I could put another spring in here, and that would increase the pressure by 1/3, right? So I could have a total of 9 springs in this pressure plate instead of just 6. So I'd be increasing the pressure quite a bit here. So I'm tempted to disassemble this pressure plate, but I might leave that for the next video. So that's the game. We also have to check, and I forgot to check, the height of these levers. So the manual says that you'd to adjust these, if you had to, you'd put them in a clutch gauge, but of course good luck finding them. However, I believe my method here serves to it applies to any clutch, and ideally in most cases you just get the whole new pressure plate with the clutch disc and you just replace it. But I'm showing you guys how to use intelligence and common sense to repair or diagnose any clutch, and which is useful if you live in the middle of nowhere. I mean Canada, and you don't have access to old clutch parts. However, these things are very you can't destroy them. Springs, we should be able to find them from whatever application. I bet you I could even use head valves, springs for cylinder heads, cylinder head springs, valve springs, or just use it from another clutch. So it's not going to be a big huge issue, but it's just annoying that people either put the wrong one in or put one that was weak and worn out. I wish I could measure how much I'm pressing on this here, how far I can press. I'm definitely compressing it more than the 1.5 inches. I'm able to make the springs go to their max